So that actually leads to my next question for you on this. As you've worked with startups over the decades and you've watched some of the things, and then, the past 10, it didn't just happen in 2022. It's been happening for 10 years or so, where technology has really started accelerating things. As you look at the startup world, what are some things that you look at that you go, things are dynamically different today than they were 7, 10, 15 years ago? Let's start there, because then I want to get back to what's consistent, because I think that will help us get to. So as we look to the future, what things are the safer bets, or the things that you kind of know are consistent, and where are some of the things? So what are the things? Are there things that you look at that you go, this is actually very different? Like if you're going into the startup space today, this is different advice that I would give to somebody than I would have if I was working with somebody 10 years ago.
Sure, sure. So the history of starting companies, and I'm not going to go too far back, but a couple generations ago, you had to raise enough money to get a space and hire people and have equipment and buy inventory. And that was a significant amount of money. And sometimes you could do it through banks or mortgaging your house. And then all of a sudden, VCs came along, and that was another way to get enough money to start your business. And then
Okay.
roughly 20 years ago, you could get a computer or now a laptop and start your business that way. And fast forward to today, not only can you start a business at the cost of a laptop, you can automate a large part of your business, your marketing, your sales, your product development, any process in between, and you can start to use AI and other programs to really automate much of what you're trying to do, so that you can focus on your value proposition and distinguish yourself from competitors. That is incredibly different. The pace at which you can get out to market is now, days instead of years.
Okay. So that's interesting. That, well, and I think in some ways, when you this comes with goods and bads, I can see
Yes.
where, but I do think when I talk to a lot of people who I've, encountered over the years, when they think about starting a business, they do have, I think there's still a lot of people that have that 15, 20-year-old mindset of, well, if I'm going to start a business, I've got to do this and I've got to do this. And it feels very onerous. Like, oh boy, like I'm nowhere near ready to be able to do something like that. But what you just described, I think opens the door for a lot more people who maybe have some really good ideas or things that they think they could do, to legitimately be able to start a business without necessarily having to be like, well, you got to, like you said, mortgage your house and be able to take out a second mortgage to be able to do some of this stuff, which I think has historically kept some people from going, I have a really good idea, but like, I'm not ready to go that deep with it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, we're going to talk a lot about pros and cons. And one of the trade offs is when you started a business in the past, you had to field a lot of questions right away from potential
Okay.
investors or banks. And so you had to go through iterations of thinking through, okay, how am I going to solve this problem and run a business? Now, if you could do it almost overnight to start a business, presumably you're not getting a lot of feedback right away. But
Yeah.
in this scenario, it's like, okay, well, how do I create that feedback? How do I slow roll into this? And some of the ways that we'll get into is doing starting a business on a part-time basis, or putting an MVP out there and letting people test it for a while. So even though you could technically start your business, and maybe you happen to have friends and family who could loan you $100,000, which is a great situation, and actually get that business pretty far down the road, that doesn't mean you should. And so maybe you
Yeah.
should think back to 20 years ago and some of the things they were doing, and how is that pro useful for you today?
I was just going to say, that was going to be my question about the risks, is I can see the barrier for entry becoming so low now, that before you had a lot more opportunity to get your teeth kicked in a little bit, where you're like, I've got this great business idea, I'm going to do this. And it was like, yeah, okay. You started going through it and you had a little more opportunity to go, oh, this actually, I either need to refine this business idea, or maybe this isn't as great as I thought as it was. And you kind of had a little bit more runway, where I can see now somebody could go head first into it, think they have a great business, but really it's not all that great. And you would have to be more intentional of finding that feedback loop to actually make sure you're validating it so you don't go too far down a path.
No, that's totally true. Like, let's think about some of the businesses that are successful today. That little company, Google, they did not start out doing search engine marketing. That was their fourth or fifth or even further, business idea. And yet that's how they broke out and became one of the Magnificent Seven today. Slack started as a gaming company and they just used this product to communicate internally. The game didn't go anywhere, but everyone's like, we love this product. Maybe we should start to push that out to the public. That's true for
Right.
many companies that pivot successfully. And so that takes time to think about, okay, what do I have? How do I get it out to market? How are people going to respond? How are people going to actually use this to solve their problems? And then you keep iterating on that. If you take,
Okay.
100,000, 500,000, and you just put something out there, it's going to be pretty unlikely that it's going to stick. You've just spent a lot of money and a lot of time and not have a lot of results for it.